is yours.
Thank you, Ambassador. Distinguished delegates from member states, colleagues from the OAS, it is a pleasure to speak to you this morning around a topic of growing importance. Emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence are profoundly transforming our region and our world by offering greater efficiencies and new capabilities. Their potential, quite frankly, goes far beyond what we can even begin to imagine. But at the same time, as we are all learning in diverse fora, such as this one, these same opportunities will also bring significant risks if not properly managed. Today, we have an opportunity to take a closer look at how artificial intelligence can be used to more effectively manage the organization of major events or crowded spaces and other security-related possibilities. For instance, AI can enhance physical security at mass events by improving threat detection, crowd monitoring, and emergency response. AI-powered surveillance, facial recognition, and behavior analysis can help security teams identify threats in real time, enabling rapid intervention. Automated crowd analytics can assess density and movement patterns, thereby preventing stampedes and overcrowding. And AI-driven drones and robotics can enhance perimeter security, monitor restricted areas, and assist in real-time incident management. These advancements strengthen security at major events, making them safer for attendees and staff while improving overall operational efficiency. However, integrating AI into physical security can present challenges as well. AI surveillance, including facial recognition, raises privacy and ethical concerns, requiring clear regulations to balance security with individual rights. AI systems may also produce biased results, leading to inaccurate threat detection or profiling. High costs and reliance on accurate, real-time data can limit access, especially for smaller events. And public skepticism toward AI monitoring may impact trust and compliance. Some of you may have seen examples of this recently at airports. It is SMS opinion at this stage that building physical security resilience requires integrating AI with traditional security measures to adapt to evolving threats. It also requires transparent policies, human oversight, and ethical AI development to ensure responsible implementation and public acceptance. International cooperation and policy development are key to ensuring responsible AI use, including for major events. Cross-border collaboration on AI standards, data sharing, and good practices strengthens security at major events. Investments in AI training for security personnel improves human AI coordination. And public engagement and transparency in AI policies build trust, helping governments and event organizers maximize AI's benefits while addressing its challenges. We will hear about this and much more from our distinguished panel of speakers today. For our part, the Inter-American Committee Against Terrorism, SICTE, has been a leader in addressing AI in the cybersecurity realm. The session today is one of many examples of SICTE's work to raise awareness of AI risks and opportunities in policy and governance spaces. These initiatives have fostered greater dialogue among member states and advanced the idea that regional commitment and collaboration can be powerful tools for creating a safer, more inclusive, and more resilient environment, both physically and digitally. We look forward to building on these experiences to continue to raise awareness of the impact of AI and emerging technologies across the security spectrum. I hope you find the session to be useful to all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary Marquez. We move to the next item on today's agenda, which focuses on the implementation of AI facial recognition technology in public security and its role in law enforcement. In that regard, we will hear from experts who will provide insights into the benefits, challenges, and responsible use of facial recognition technologies. On behalf of the committee, it's my honor to thank our distinguished guests in advance for their willingness to share their insights and experience with us on this important topic. I ask distinguished guests, where possible, to stay with us after their respective presentations so as to participate in the dialogue with member states. The first such presentation will be by Mr. Audran McCarthy, Program Management Officer and New York Liaison Officer on Artificial Intelligence and at the United Nations Interregional Crime and Justice Research Institute, UNICRI. He will deliver a virtual presentation on the responsible use of facial recognition technology in law enforcement. I invite Mr. McCarthy to take the floor.
Madam Chair, Excellencies, distinguished guests, thank you very much for having me here, join you here today. It's a pleasure. Just to confirm, I am audible, and if I could have slides brought up.
We're hearing you.
Excellent, thank you very much. And my slides are visible?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you very much. So as I said, it's a distinct pleasure to be here today to join you to talk about facial recognition technology in law enforcement, specifically looking at the responsible use of this technology. And this is a topic we have been working at UNICRI for many years now, particularly in the context of our Center for Artificial Intelligence and Robotics, which is based in The Hague. And we're happy to share the experience and expertise we've developed. Slide, please. So facial recognition technology it's essentially a biometrics technology. So largely it finds itself in the same category as fingerprinting technologies as well as DNA related technologies. It's a technology that is, of course, as has been mentioned in the opening of this session, a technology that has gained a lot of attention in recent years, primarily because of the potential and the opportunities it brings to the law enforcement community for faster, more accurate investigations. There's a growing interest in terms of the use of the technology to be able to identify naturally criminals, fugitives, persons of interest. But I think it's also important to mention the application of the technology to identify missing persons and victims of crimes as well, which is perhaps an aspect of it that receives less attention. So broadly speaking, there's two main ways the technology is or can be applied. There's what's known as face verification, and this is essentially where you have two images. For instance, an ID card of a person, and you have another suspect image, and you're trying to match the person in the photo to the known image. This is what's known as one-to-one face verification. And then you have what's known as face identification, and this is also known as one-to-many. And this is essentially where you're looking for an unknown face within a large database. And you're hoping to try to identify a possible match to help you identify who is this unknown face. So these are, broadly speaking, the two main uses, one-to-one and one-to-many. As I said, there's an extensive opportunity in the use of technology, but it also comes with significant risks, as extensively. These have been touched upon already, so if biometric data is not collected or analyzed in the correct manner without informed consent, there's the potential for it to violate the right to privacy of individuals. There is, of course, particularly when we talk about mass events, there's a potential, or public spaces, there is a potential for a chilling effect in terms of individuals' rights to freedoms of expression, assembly, association. Then, of course, there is the potential for bias to lead to misidentifications of persons, potentially also even discrimination, and thereby undermining our very fundamental principles in our legal system and the rule of law, the presumption of innocence. And finally, as has been mentioned just moments ago as well, there is a very, very important aspect of the detrimental effect of all of this on public trust, on law enforcement as an institution itself. Next slide, please. The potential for all these harms has led to a very heated policy discussion and debates around regulation. We've seen this play out at many different levels in the courts. For instance, there's been very notable cases in Brazil and in the United Kingdom. The courts have particularly held that the use of facial recognition has breached certain rights and specifically called out for the prohibition on the use of technologies in these instances. We've also seen it at the national level. Governments such as the Netherlands have also specifically put in place requests for additional or heightened risk assessments or impact assessments on the right to privacy and ethical considerations in human rights before they would further authorize use of facial recognition. We've also seen it at local government level, particularly in the United States, where we've seen city governments, state governments also banning the use of facial recognition technologies in public spaces. And then finally, we've also seen it play out in the form of self-regulation, with tech sector companies opting to not sell to law enforcement agencies. Next slide, please. Just a flag, you may be aware, the AI Act was recently adopted in the context of the European Union. This is the first ever comprehensive attempt to regulate AI as a whole in terms of its risks and opportunities. It entered into force in February. The reason I'm mentioning it here is what's known as the Brussels effect, and this is essentially whereby the Act itself will be relevant as an example in terms of the development of further regulation, and also because the potential for applicability of the Act when tools or technologies developed outside of the EU concern or impact EU citizens or the data concerning EU. So what does the AI Act say about facial recognition? Well, first of all, the AI Act takes a risk-based approach in terms of the obligations for the development and use of systems. And that essentially means that depending on the level of the risk, you have certain particular obligations that are proportionate to that level. The AI Act itself does not strictly prohibit the use of what's known as retrospective or post-event facial recognition. This is primarily in the context of a law enforcement investigation where something occurs, and after the event, you're trying to investigate and identify the individual. So that particular use of facial recognition is not prohibited. But what is heavily regulated is real-time facial recognition in public spaces. And as I said, this is flagged as high risk and can only be authorized in particular cases, such as in terms of preventing, for instance, a terrorist attack. And for this, when it is permitted, the AI Act requires prior judicial or administrative authorization. So that's the legal framework from Europe. Next slide, please. Moving beyond Europe, more globally, again, coming from the United Nations, just to speak a little bit from our perspective. Within the UN, there's no official kind of binding stance, so to speak. The Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has increasingly acknowledged the role and relevance of AI in this context. And there's been several specific references to facial recognition, particularly in the context of the risk of bias and the need for more governance systems or mechanisms. The High Commissioner for Human Rights has also specifically talked about it, particularly in the context of the risks of facial recognition and the slippery slope that potentially comes with it in terms of leading into mass surveillance of public spaces. A notable report in 2021 specifically flagged that in the event that we cannot ensure a specific technology will lead to the violation of human rights, then in this case, we should place a moratorium on the use of this technology. And they specifically called out remote real-time facial recognition as an example of this. So the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights has specifically flagged this as an area of important concern. Next slide, please. So that's a little bit the debate. Where my organization comes into this is in the context of trying to strike a balance between the opportunities we see with the technology and the risks. The QR code on the screen will take you to a policy framework that my organization Unicry has developed together in partnership with Interpol, the World Economic Forum, and the Netherlands Police. And this, as I said, is really intended to find that way in between the risks and the opportunities. We hope that the guidance document we've developed will be not only kind of an aid in terms of development of the kind of the governance systems or the frameworks that are required to use the technology, but also will even be an operational guide to help law enforcement agencies actually improve their use of the technology itself. Next slide, please. Just very briefly, there are some limitations in our work that I'd like to flag, particularly given the focus of today's session on the mass gatherings and crowded spaces sort of element. Just to flag that our policy framework that we have developed is focused specifically on law enforcement investigations and specifically on the post-event investigative use. So this, as I mentioned, is the case where a crime has occurred, a suspect has been captured on an image, and we're trying to identify who that person is after the event has occurred. If you could just jump back. Yeah, sorry. Thank you. So that's the limitations. We have focused specifically on that and specifically excluded the use of real-time facial recognition, primarily because there's a lot of nuance in the uses of the technologies, and to build out something that's really tangible and operational and informative, we felt it was important to focus on a specific use case. So we focused in on the law enforcement investigative post-incident use case to be as practical as much as possible. That being said, the guidance that is contained in our framework is broadly useful to all sorts of uses of facial recognition, and also in the context of real-time facial recognition. That being said, with real-time facial recognition, you will have extra requirements and extra care and attention would be due to particular topics such as oversight, accountability, prior authorization. But as I said, what's contained in our framework is an essential foundation that can be built upon. Next slide, please. So the framework that we've built is built around 9 principles. I won't go into the details of all of them, but just to say very quickly, they focus on everything from very, very broad kind of objectives. The first principle, ensuring respect for human and fundamental rights, necessity and proportionality. I mean, here we talk about the essential things of making sure that your uses of the technology are grounded in legal frameworks, that your data is collected and held in accordance with national law. And so on. We also have then more kind of practical, I think, guidance and recommendations, such as recommendation 3, which is focused on human oversight and accountability. Here we detail specific things like how do you build out a peer review process when you run a facial recognition search and it comes back with a potential match. How do we do a peer review? What does that peer review look like? What happens when you have a lack of consensus among the peer reviewers? How do we approach that? So very, very practical recommendations here in terms of oversight accountability. Then we also have more technical recommendations, specifically in and about system performance. Principle number 4, also the use of probe images and reference databases. 6, how do we maintain the images? How do we make sure that we don't have, as I said before, have that violation of the right to privacy? Image and metadata integrity. Again, these are the much more technical elements. Then we also have principle number 5, which is focused on the risk mitigation strategies. Here we believe that there's 2 main elements. There's a requirement, or there should be a requirement from our perspective in terms of having an ex-ante evaluation of the technology that should be conducted by the developers of the technology. And then you also have an ongoing requirement on the law enforcement side of it to have an ex-post evaluation or an ongoing basis to understand the efficacy and the impact of the technology. This ex-post evaluation, I think, is very much linked with the final principle, number 9, on transparency. This is something we really very much encourage, transparency around how the technology is used. When we go back to that point of the potential impact on public trust, the importance of law enforcement being open about how it uses the technology, what are the use cases it uses, and what are the reference databases it's referring to, just to avoid that chilling effect on public trust. And then just one last principle I'd like to flag: training of facial examiners, principle number 8. This is something that has been absolutely crucial for us. We did a lot of close engagement with law enforcement agencies using the technology, and we found a lot of inconsistency in terms of how facial examiners are trained. Sometimes they're professional facial examiners. Sometimes they're law enforcement agencies, law enforcement officers who are assigned the role of running the facial recognition search. We have different degrees of training. We have people who've been trained for 1 day on the use of the technology, but not necessarily the potential harms that come with the technology. We have people who've been trained for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So what we've seen is a lot of inconsistency. So really what we encourage is the development of a holistic training package for facial examiners, and that the only ones be authorized to use the technology themselves be trained facial examiners. So it's a key point for us. Next slide, please. And I know I'm behind in time, so I'll just wrap up very quickly. Just to say that our facial recognition, could I just jump back one slide, please? Just to say our policy framework has been tested, and we work closely with the agencies on screen. So the Brazilian Federal Police, Gendarmerie Nationale in France, the French Judicial Police, the Swedish Police, the Netherlands National Police, and the New Zealand Police, to take our framework and to see, is it practical from an operational perspective in their agencies? Is this something that they can work with to allow them tap into the positive potential and minimize the risk? We received a lot of feedback, and we tailored our framework according to the feedback we received for them. And I think we found something that's really, from a law enforcement perspective, is really practical. So next slide, please. In the interest of time, I will skip this one and just jump onto the very last slide, please. Yeah, just here. Just to say again, I've spoken about facial recognition. Taking it beyond specifically facial recognition, just to flag to your attention another document or set of documents we've been working on at UNICRE together with Interpol, which is the Toolkit for Responsible AI Innovation in Law Enforcement. This is essentially what we believe is the blueprint for responsible AI innovation within this community. Everything from what you need to understand about the technology, what is it in a technical level, what are the principles of AI in law enforcement, how do we measure risk, how do we measure our own organizational readiness to use a technology like this. So for anybody out there whose agencies in their countries are looking to explore this technology, I would highly encourage you to pay reference to this, and please do feel free to reach out if you have any need for information. Next slide, please. And that is all I have. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to take any comments or questions.
Mr. McCarthy, I thank you on behalf of the committee for your very interesting presentation on the responsible use of facial recognition technology in law enforcement. Thank you very much. I hope you can stay around in case there are questions that member states would like to pose to you. We move from facial recognition technology in the realm of law enforcement to the next presentation titled The Impact of Facial Recognition at Major Sports Events, Council of Europe, the Framework Convention on Artificial Intelligence. For this presentation, I'm pleased to offer the floor to Mr. Peter Kimpian, Secretary of the Committee of the Council of Europe Privacy and Data Protection Convention, Convention 108. Mr. Kimpian, welcome. Please proceed.
Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor to be with you today. I maybe pause here a bit because I hear a really bad echo. Can you hear the echo in the room, or it's just me? Right, okay. So I carry on. So thank you so much for the invitation. So there are three topics I wanted to discuss with you today. One is, as you mentioned, Convention 108, for which I'm the secretary, and you might be also interested in, as this is a data protection convention, which created at the Council of Europe in the 70s and late 70s, but this is an open convention, and till date it's the only convention which is a multilateral international convention on the right to privacy and the protection of personal data. Till date, we have gathered 55 parties who has joined this convention, so it's really going way beyond of Europe and the member states of the Council of Europe, and we are working with 36 observers regularly. One of them is Oea-Csh, so I'm very happy that we can strengthen our cooperation also with this committee and on these topics. I must also mention that, as you might have already guessed, that the convention, international convention, which is based on the Vienna the law of treaty, developed in the 80s, how it's relevant in the technology discussion, such as food. And I want to inform you that the convention is expressly has been modernized in 2011. So the process started and lasted 7 long years, especially to take into account all the initiatives and all the considerations that might come with new technologies and new developments in the world of protection of private life and the data protection. One of them, of course, that you all have heard about it, was the European Union initiatives of regulatory initiatives, the GDPR, which we fully also into our convention, ensuring a high synergies because we share 27 member states, the two organizations, and also because we believe that these standards should be adhered to and applied all over the world as right to privacy, the universal human rights. And with that, and as I mentioned, the framework committee that is working on the implementation of the convention landed in a very challenging task of giving some guidelines, developing guidelines on very new technology that we have been informed of. It started to be used, and as previous speakers also allowed it to, were already very controversial on facial recognition and on the right to privacy and data protection. So in 21, on 28th of January, we were very happy to publish these guidelines, where the guidelines basically gave a kind of context and definitions what facial recognition is, defining that that was an automatic processing of digital images containing individuals' faces for identification and verification. So we touched upon those two purposes for the data processing of individual face templates. And the previous speaker very well described how this works and how the technology works. So I will not spend much time of it. We immediately realized that the use of this technology are many and varied, and some of them can seriously infringe the rights of data subjects, as we have a list of rights defined in our conventions very well, and widely recognized also in other, the more than 156 data protection legislation all around the world. So for example, integrating facial recognition technologies to existing surveillance systems poses a serious risk to the right to privacy and the protection of personal data, as well as to other human rights, since the use of these technology do not always require awareness, cooperation of individuals that are on consent or any transparency. And the is working and fed by data of individuals and that are processed, considering, for instance, the possibility of accessing digital images of individuals on the internet. So in that, after realizing this, the committee started working on the guidelines and adopted a set of reference measures that governments, facial recognition developers, and manufacturers, service providers, and entities using facial recognition should adhere to and should follow, not to adversely affect human dignity, human rights, and fundamental freedom of any person, including the right to protection of personal data. So, what are the main building blocks of this guidelines? I won't go through all of them, but just to mention some of them, which are very relevant in monitoring or using facial recognition, if at all, for sports events, for security of sports events. First and foremost, we need to understand that biometric data are usually acknowledged and viewed as sensitive data, or how we call in our convention special category of data. There are a list of data which we categorize as such, which are touching on the very intimate identity of a person, revealing sexual, political opinion, religious beliefs, and so on and so forth. And the biometric data, which can uniquely identify a person, also belongs to these categories of data, which has been added to this list very recently during the modernization process I mentioned, along with the general data. So here we speak about special categories of data and why it is important. It is important because 108 Plus Convention requires that for the processing of personal special categories of data, the data controllers need to put in place an appropriate level of protection that also goes for normal categories of data, but which complementing those and goes beyond the simple measures or established for normal categories of data. So when we are speaking about data,
May I interrupt you briefly? We
to
Cyprian?
protect more data and put additional measures before starting processing of these data. The committee in the guidelines, certain uses for facial recognition technologies should be banned. For instance, in order to avoid any risk of discrimination, it recommends prohibiting the use of facial recognition for the sole purpose of determining a person's skin, color, religious or other belief, sex, racial or ethnic, age, health, or situation, unless appropriate safeguards are provided for by law. I'm going to come back to this in a minute, that presenting a use case for that, because there are two things. One, why this very radical position. And normally, the committee is not suggesting to have a ban on technologies. On the contrary, it tries to give guidance how to use technologies. And this is an event. This is a suggestion not to use for this type of data and for purposes that could lead very easily to discrimination, because we are speaking about a very specific type of data, which is our face. So we can very easily understand that when a data breach occurs about our phone numbers or email addresses, this is tragic, and it can lead to very bad consequences. Or we can easily change the service provider or change an email address, but we will not be able to change our face. And if there's a misuse or any security breach in that related to the use of this, it would be really really detrimental for the individuals. So this ban should also apply to effect recognition technologies, which can identify emotions to be used to detect personal traits, inner feelings, mental health of workers engagement. They pose importance in fields such as employment, access to insurance, or education. So in that sense, the guidelines call upon the developers, manufacturers, and service providers that they should ensure very high quality of data and algorithms used. Also, they need to make sure that the reliability of the tools are perfect and without doubt, as well as data security, which needs to be state of the art measures put in place. And therefore, there has been also some thoughts given about the education of users and raising the awareness of the very high potential and intrusiveness of this technology. So entities that are using facial recognition technologies were suggested to comply with applicable data protection legislations, and not to forget to think about before the use of facial technology that the data protection legislation should be adhered to, and check whether legitimacy of the processing, transparency measures, the fairness, accuracy, accountability principles, the data minimization, the limited retention period, data security are all met, and proper privacy, if not human-centered impact assessment, are carried out. Finally, there is also a chapter on the rights of individuals. I will not list all of them. Article 9 of Convention 08 plus make a good list that gives really potential for data subjects to remain in the control of data, but these data subjects' rights needs to be put in place and also ensured for data subjects. So I am also conscious of the time, so I'm just going to a very recent use case, which I just wanted to present very briefly to the facial recognition discussions, or the use of facial recognition discussion for the Paris Olympics, Olympic Games. And we have had our regular members who made a very thorough report to the committee about the discussions and the decisions that after came out, which was very much aligned, even I would say went further in terms of rigorousness and seriousness than the guidelines that we have developed at the committee level. Because the CNIL, the French Data Protection Authority, considered that facial recognition systems, although it was suggested to be used for a very high security events, such was the Paris Olympics, with many challenges for security and for the risk and risk mitigation. But nevertheless, they said that the potential risk of unprecedented surveillance and the risk of undermining anonymity in the public sphere are too high, and the unique identification of individuals by a particularly sensitive and permanent data, which is the face, are unusual type of data to base security measures on, and an imperfect bias technology in that risk, right, according to gender, skin color, for example, was also deemed very debatable and very is a matter of a source of concern. So therefore, the decisions, after all, with the Data Protection Authority, in consortium with the Data Protection Authority, and their advice was to use not facial recognition cameras during the Paris Olympics, but augmented cameras. And the augmented cameras, and I'm really summarizing what I wanted to say, that only 8 events it could give. It could detect only 8 events, not the face of person, but the presence of abandoned objects, the presence or use of weapons, the failure of a person or vehicle to follow the common direction of traffic, the crossing or presence of person or vehicle in a prohibited or sensitive area, the presence of a person on the ground following a fall, a crowd movement, too high density of people and start of fire. So these were the events that the camera was trained to track, and facial recognition at the end was not used at the Paris Games for the security of the Paris Games. So with that, I really thank you for your attention. Sorry for just passing the time a bit. Of course, open for any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kimpian. I wanted to draw to your attention that as your discourse went on, it became increasingly difficult to understand everything that you were saying. In that regard, I hope that you are in a position to share your thoughts with us, perhaps through a document in writing that we can distribute, so that we can appreciate in full the context of your comments with us today. Notwithstanding, I am very pleased on behalf of the committee to extend thanks to you for your insights on the experience of the Council of Europe on this issue, particularly regarding Convention 108. Thank you very much. We hope that you will stick around just in the event there are questions for you as we move on in today's session. Thank you. For the next presentation, I'm pleased to offer the floor to Mr. Callistus Joseph, Acting Assistant Director, Policy, Strategy, and Innovation of the CARICOM Implementation Agency for Crime and Security, CARICOM Impacts. He will speak on balancing security and rights, the responsible use of AI and facial recognition in public safety. I'm delighted to offer the floor. Please proceed.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. Chairman of the Committee of Ambassador Jacinth Henry Martin, Permanent Representative of St. Kitts and Nevis to the OAS, Secretary for Multidimensional Security, Mr. Ivan Marquez, fellow presenters. From the outset, allow me to thank the Permanent Council of the Organization of American States for inviting CARICOM Impacts to deliver a presentation. English representatives, colleagues. It's an honor to address today on a matter that stands at the intersection of technology, security, and human rights. The use of artificial intelligence for facial recognition in mass events. Artificial intelligence is reshaping the security landscape in ways once confined to science fiction. AI-powered facial recognition offers a revolutionary tool to enhance public safety at mass events, whether at sporting arenas, international summits, or large-scale cultural celebrations and festivals, such as carnivals. AI-powered facial recognition technology presents us with new technologies to enhance security efforts, improve situation awareness, and support law enforcement in real-time identification of threats. But the question before us is not whether we should use AI. The question is, how do we ensure that AI rather than control them? How do we make AI support against rights? CARICOM Impacts approaches this discussion with a deep understanding of AI in law enforcement. In a security institution, we recognize that technology must be harnessed with precision, with accountability, with humanity. Excellencies, we must be clear-eyed about both the power and the peril of facial recognition. Yes, AI can quickly identify persons, locate missing individuals, and strengthen crowd monitoring. Networks, enhance border security, and support law enforcement in ways never before possible. But we must not be blinded by the progress. Without safeguards, AI can become a force of unchecked surveillance, a mechanism for discrimination, and an enabler of mass violation of privacy. We must confront AI systems only as good as the data they are trained. Studies show that facial recognition misidentifies individuals at disproportionately high rate based on race, gender. This is not just technological flaw, fundamental injustice. AI must work for all, not against some. 2, privacy and oversight. The deployment of AI in security raises serious ethical concerns. If biometric data is collected without stringent safeguards, it can be hacked, exploited, or weaponized against the very citizens it was meant to protect. Who owns this data? Who has access? Who ensures its responsible use? These questions must be answered before AI is widely deployed, not after. 3. Democratic integrity. AI must never be used to suppress dissent, silent opposition, or erode civil liberties. The power of AI must remain under the control
We
of
have
laws,
this research,
not ambitions.
and so we're
Colleagues,
kind of working on that.
CARICOM
Please bear with us. What we're trying to do is to reestablish connection, and this time to let him know what he needs to do to avoid the challenges that we're facing right now. It's no sense to go back through 10 to 15 minutes of this without anyone understanding. So we're really just making the effort to correct the situation so that this is of value to us. How was your day? So quiet, I just felt the urge to say something.
Good day, Chair.
Mr. Joseph, are you hearing us?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Yes, I explain what happened. You actually were disconnected from our end. We had tried to reach out to you that many of the persons sitting in the permanent council could not understand what you were saying. And so we could not get that message to you. And so what we tried to do is to interrupt the connection so that we can speak to you and that you understood what was going on. I understand that the connection is quite weak. And one of the recommendations that I'm no techno whiz myself, but one of the recommendations we just had is that perhaps if you turned off the camera, it would be clearer when you spoke. We enjoyed having you in, on our screen, but apparently this would facilitate and add greater value to the experience here. So I'm going to ask you now if you can. I think we got most of it, but maybe if you can go back, maybe to the last page you were on, and restart, that would be quite helpful. Thank you so very much for your patience and understanding.
Thank you, Ambassador. I'm still getting an echo, so I get more than just my bandwidth. I have the same issue the presenter earlier has. Please let me know if you are hearing me properly, Ambassador.
But we have seen this before with the speaker before you. We hope it will continue. Is there any way for you to be hearing us while you're speaking? Because if it does get nebulous for us, if it's all cloudy and we can't understand, we're going to have to indicate. But I just want to know whether you are able to hear while you're speaking.
Yes, I can hear. Is the unfortunate thing is that I'm getting an echo similar to the last speaker.
Okay, we're not hearing the echo for now on this side, but I would love to be able to tell you if that situation deteriorates. So
Okay, thank you.
proceed, and I will be sure to point out if we can't hear.
Yeah, thank you very much, and apologies to all distinguished delegates. Unfortunately, I don't think it's a challenge on my side or on it's just a technological science challenge. Distinguished delegates, it is an honor again to address you today on this matter that stands at the intersection of technology, security, and human rights, which is the use of artificial intelligence for facial recognition in mass events. As stated earlier, artificial intelligence is reshaping the security landscape in ways once confined to science fiction. Today, AI-powered facial recognition offers a revolutionary tool to enhance public safety at mass events. Whether it's at sporting arenas, international summits, or large-scale cultural celebrations, AI-powered facial recognition technology presents us with new opportunities to enhance security efforts, improve situation awareness, and support law enforcement in real-time identification of threats. But the question before us is not whether we should use AI. The question is, how do we ensure that AI serves the people rather than control them? How do we make AI a shield against threats rather than a sword against rights? CARICOM Impacts approaches this discussion with a deep understanding of the potential and the perils of AI in law enforcement. As a regional security institution, we recognize that technology must, with precision, with accountability, and with humanity. Excellencies, we must be clear-eyed about both the power and the peril of facial recognition technology. Yes, I can quickly identify persons of interest, locate missing individuals, and strengthen crowd monitoring. It can help us stay ahead of criminal networks, enhance border security, and support law enforcement in ways never before possible. But we must not be blinded by the glow of technological progress. For without the right safeguards, AI can become a force of unchecked surveillance, a mechanism for discrimination, and an enabler of mass violation of privacy. We must confront three critical challenges. One, bias and fairness. AI systems are only as good as the data they are trained on. Studies show that facial recognition identifies individuals at disproportionately high rates based on gender, race, and ethnicity. This is not just a technological flaw. It is a fundamental injustice. AI must work for all of us, not against some. Two, privacy and oversight. The deployment of AI in security raises serious ethical and legal concerns. If biometric data is collected without stringent safeguards, it can be hacked, exploited, or weaponized against the very citizen it was meant to protect. Who owns this data? Who has access? Who ensures its responsible use? These questions must be answered before AI is widely deployed, not after. 3, democratic integrity. AI must never be used to suppress dissent, silent opposition, or erode civil liberties. The power of AI must remain under the control of laws, not ambitions. Distinguished delegates, CARICOM has not been a passive observer in this global debate on AI and security. Through CARICOM Impacts, we are actively shaping discussions on the responsible use of AI in law enforcement. In 2023, CARICOM took a bold and uncompromising stance by adopting the CARICOM Declaration on Autonomous Weapon System, a landmark declaration on AI governance in security application. This declaration sets clear, ethical, and legal principles that should guide today's discussion. 4 key principles stand at the heart of the CARICOM Declaration. 1, human oversight is non-negotiable. AI must complement, not replace, human decision-making. 2, transparency and accountability must be guarded. The use of facial recognition technology must be governed by clear laws, subject to oversight and accountable to the public. Citizens must never live in fear of invisible surveillance. 3, bias and discrimination must be eliminated. AI-driven security solutions must be trained on diverse, representative data sets to ensure fairness and accuracy across all populations. And 4, international cooperation is essential. The challenge posed by AI do not stop at national borders. Member states must work together to develop shared principles, best practices, and mechanisms for oversight. Given the transnational nature of security threats, harmonized regulations and information sharing mechanisms will be key to ensuring the effective and lawful use of AI. CARICOM Impacts has gone beyond policy advocacy and normative frameworks. We have taken practical steps to build awareness, strengthen law enforcement capacity, and set regional norms on AI use in security. But our work is far from over. A key consideration for AI deployment in law enforcement is cybersecurity and data protection. Strict data retention policies and cybersecurity protocols must be in place to prevent unauthorized access to sensitive biometric information. CARICOM Impacts has been at the forefront of strengthening regional cybersecurity and cyber defense. The CARICOM Impact Cyber Fusion Unit, established on February 1st, 2024, and housed at the Regional Fusion Center in CARICOM Impacts, is dedicated to protecting the region's critical infrastructure, promoting trust and cooperation, and enhancing the overall cyber resilience of CARICOM member states. The Cyber Fusion Unit leads the CARICOM region's effort in cybersecurity, cybercrime investigation, diplomacy, and defense, incorporating crucial elements of awareness and capacity building to ensure a comprehensive and proactive approach to regional cyber resilience. Excellencies, history has shown us that technological revolution without ethical lead to unintended consequences. Today, we stand at the threshold of a new era, one where AI can either protect or infringe, enhance or oppress, strengthen or undermine. Let us not be remembered as a generation that enabled mass surveillance under the guise of security. Let us be the leaders who build a future where security, freedom, and responsibility walk hand in hand. I urge this body consider the CARICOM Declaration of Autonomous Weapon System as an important reference point in our collective effort to establish strong, accountable, and fair AI policies in law enforcement and public safety. CARICOM Impact stand ready to continue this dialogue, to share our expertise, and to contribute to the responsible deployment of AI-powered security solutions that respect the rule of law, protect civil liberties, and enhance public safety. I look forward to today's discussion and to a future where AI-driven security measures reinforce rather than erode our shared democratic values. I thank you.
Mr. Joseph, thank you again for your patience and particularly for your informative presentation on the responsible use of AI and facial recognition technology in public security. We trust that we can continue to count on your presence with us to respond to any comments or questions from member states. We will now hear from Mr. Fadi Kanan, co-founder and head of strategy and business development of Eagle AI. He joins us virtually and will share insights on AI-powered crowd management. I am delighted to offer the floor.
Madam Chair, delegates, also hear an echo, so try to fight that. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Hearing you, the technical advice I have been receiving is that if you begin to hear an echo, could you kindly turn down the volume on your end? But we are hearing you clearly. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. So I'm told I could share my presentation from my end, unless it becomes problematic, then maybe we can share from the team's end. Can you see my screen?
Yes, it is visible.
Perfect. So let's make sure this is all good. Okay. All right, just a second. Okay, perfect. Just to double check, can everyone still see my screen?
Yes, we're seeing.
Okay, perfect. Here we go. Madam Chair, once again, Excellencies, delegates, thank you for having me. So my name is Fadi Kanan, and I am the co-founder of Eagle AI. So opposite to some of the discussions that already happened, I reside on the academic and private sector seat of this discussion. But obviously, I think it's very important for us all to be here and have this conversation all together. So I'm going to be walking you through real quickly what we do really, and the work we do in crowd management and in facial ID, and then some of the case studies and some of the uses that we've already had, and how obviously this relates to you all here and OAS member states. So, I mean, I think maybe I could perhaps cruise by this one real quickly. Obviously, I think everyone here is aware of the problems that we have with crowd management and public safety failures all around the world. So my background is in a bit of law enforcement. So I worked at Interpol and in other agencies, and this was something that we obviously saw often. This map here that you see, it's actually points where deadly crowd incidents happened because of inefficient crowd management. You know, whether it was overcrowding or stampedes, you know, bad evacuation and disorder and violence. So this is obviously something that we saw a lot all over the place, and this is where really the idea for Eagle AI came up, and I was working with my co-founder who's an academic at LSE, and this is where we came up with the solution. So basically what EAI does is we plug into CCTV footage or drone footage or satellite data, and we can monitor, count, map, 3D model, predict, and manage crowds. Now, not to be stepping on all the ethical toes that we obviously were just covering, this is done in a specific way, which I will show very shortly, where every single person that we are actually monitoring, we actually have no idea who they are, and it's purely in terms of counts. So I'll display that very quickly. But just before I do that, I'll also add a big part of the work that we do comes straight out of research and academia. So half of our organization is obviously the commercial side that does this. The other half is purely research. So just to make sure that we're always on top of our game in terms of algorithms and in terms of ways that we do things. So this is a very quick technological breakdown of really how it looks. So obviously this is in Mecca, in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So in the first screen, it's the raw footage, so you monitor the crowd. The second one is where we start to count the crowd, so we can know how many people are in a certain place at a certain time. In the third one, we map it. The fourth one, it becomes a model. And this is where we really have, and this is, I think, some of the most important things that we've had with a lot of the law enforcement agencies we have a prediction model. So the prediction model can tell you ahead of time before basically something bad happens. So we have a forecast model that's based on machine learning algorithms. And based on this model, you can have decisions that would show up to the security stakeholders so that they can take action, allocate resources, do whatever they need basically in order to avoid that problem. I'm gonna try to play this video. I'm not sure if it'll work here. Okay, it does, great. So this is obviously raw footage from Mecca. If everyone can have a look at the bottom right corner, you can see the count. So that's a live count of how many people are in that frame. This is where we create the 3D model, the digital twin, and we can predict based on crowd dynamics and crowd movement what if something bad's going to happen. And then obviously that's translated into decision making that goes back to the security stakeholders or the law enforcement agency that's ready on standby so that they can either, so here it says, open other points to divert, to avoid overcrowding, to avoid some kind of problem. So, and this is maybe one of the most important parts here. So we had this issue that there's obviously a lot of problems around, facial recognition, and there's different legal implications around the world. So we try to come up with a solution where we actually don't collect or know anything about the person other than the second they enter the premise, wherever we are, we allocate a specific PIN or like a number, an ID number to them. And that's how we know who they are and where they go. So that eliminates a lot of the problems, obviously, with bias and with having to look at different demographics of the person. We simply have their existence becomes a dot on a map, and it has a specific identifier, and that's it. So these are the different sectors that we work with, obviously public, private, and insurance. And before I jump into this specific example of some of the work we're doing in the UK, we obviously had the issue where we'd be in a specific event where a person does become a person of interest, right? But since we have them down as a number basically on our map, a point, we could track and then later apprehend. This was what we were doing in the UK. So we were doing a lot of work with the Manchester police in their stadiums and in the Manchester City United Stadium. And we also, through a lot of the trials with them, then ended up doing some stuff on protests. So we'll get to that shortly. And then we kind of spread all over the UK, and we're doing all kinds of things with different people. And I wanted to show maybe a little bit of what that looks like here, so everyone can have a better idea. Oops, there we go. I think we'll turn on. There we go. So, oh no, this is the. Here we go. So this, for example, is a. Oops, back and forth. My apologies. And there we go. So this here is a parade. So it's a football parade. This is from drone footage, actually. It seems like my screen has. There we go. So it's from drone footage, live footage that we had received from the police that fed into our system and back to them. This is from like a food market outside of one of their universities as well. So that from a drone as well, so that they could keep basically keep tabs on everyone and understand how many people were in and out. It seems to be lagging a little bit. Let's see. Apologies for the lag. Perhaps I'll just skip the video since it's perhaps a bit heavy for the bandwidth. Yeah, let's do that. Apologies again. Let me just make sure it stops and we can jump forward. Here, maybe I'll just stop sharing and then we can come back in. So anyways, as I was saying, we tested it basically on different applications, on protests and on football games, on stadiums, on matches, on tournaments, on all kinds of things. And one of the things that we were able to always do is tell the police where all people were at all times, for safety reasons, obviously, and also in case anything came up and anything was alarming. And one of the things that we were also able to do, I think, which was also very important for the police and law enforcement, we were able to tell them at all times how many people there were, and also how many law enforcement or how many security staff there were at the same time. Because obviously different countries have different norms. And for example, in a protest, for every 10 protesters, you need to have at least one officer or one security staff. So from live drone footage, we could instantly report back and tell them, for example, this is a problem. There's too many people here. You need to allocate resources accordingly to different places. So my screen has. Okay, there we go. We're back. So then we shifted to the US and we started doing some work in the US. And obviously there are different laws when it comes to facial recognition. In the UK, it's legal, but there's a lot of restrictions. In the US, also legal, also restrictions, but a bit more lenient. And based on a lot of the demand as well, we basically just overlaid facial ID into the system. So it does what it does quite accurately in terms of, localizing people and knowing where they are. And then when there is a need by law enforcement, then we were able to turn that into basically, recognizing who the person was and cross-checking with local law enforcement. So there's another video. I'm going to skip that so we don't fall back on the same issue. So how this all relates, obviously, to OAS members, member states. A major part, I think it was 22% of all major events happen in OAS member states, but that does not come at the exception of some of the incidents also that took place. And I think between religious events, cultural celebrations, and sporting events, and these high-density urban areas, there truly is a lot of risk when it comes to crowd management and public safety. And using tools like the tool we have, and in general technologies, where we do combine machine learning algorithms, AI, and facial recognition, and AI-powered facial recognition, it can really help. And we've seen, at least from some of the work that we've done, we've decreased incidents by 34%, which really has a ripple effect, whether it was through helping in access control, search and rescue, preventing incidents, and allocating resources accordingly. We were really able to reap benefits that ended up saving lives, saving lots of resources as well, and helping those security stakeholders or law enforcement to better plan and better understand crowd movement and crowd safety. That would be the end of my presentation. I apologize again for the slight technical difficulties and delays, but I appreciate everyone's patience, and I'm more than happy to take questions during the discussion. Thank you so much.
Hacia la protección de nuestras sociedades. Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Baños. The chair recognizes the delegation of Panama.
Muchas gracias, señora Presidenta. Permítame agradecer primeramente a los distinguidos panelistas por sus presentaciones. La República de Panamá reconoce la importancia de incorporar tecnologías avanzadas como la inteligencia artificial para fortalecer la seguridad en eventos multitudinarios. El reconocimiento facial asistido por la inteligencia artificial ofrece herramientas efectivas para identificar amenazas potenciales, localizar personas desaparecidas y prevenir incidentes en tiempo real. En Panamá, empresas locales han desarrollado soluciones innovadoras en este ámbito. Por ejemplo, se han implementado sistemas de reconocimiento facial para agilizar el proceso de entrada y aumentar la seguridad en edificios de alto tráfico, permitiendo el acceso automático a través de cámaras conectadas a molinetes, lo que facilita la gestión eficiente de visitantes y refuerza las medidas de seguridad. Además, el Panama Convention Center utiliza sistemas basados en inteligencia artificial para optimizar la gestión de eventos desde la elección estratégica del lugar hasta la evaluación del éxito del evento, mejorando la experiencia de los asistentes y la. Por ello, nuestro país aboga por el desarrollo de marcos normativos que regulen el uso del reconocimiento facial por inteligencia artificial, asegurando su aplicación ética y transparente. Asimismo, promovemos la cooperación internacional para compartir buenas prácticas y lecciones aprendidas en la implementación de estas tecnologías en eventos multitudinarios. Reafirmamos nuestro compromiso de utilizar la inteligencia artificial como una herramienta para mejorar la seguridad pública, siempre respetando los derechos fundamentales de nuestros ciudadanos y visitantes. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Ambassador Delgado. The delegation of Chile is recognized.
Muchas gracias, señora Presidenta. La saludo cordialmente junto al Secretario de Seguridad Multidimensional, señor Iván Márquez, a la Secretaria Ejecutiva del SICTE, señora Alison Treppel, como de todas las y los presentes. Agradecemos a los expertos que nos han acompañado y que nos han motivado este día con sus excelentes ponencias. Quisiera compartir algunas reflexiones en base a lo que hemos escuchado en esta mañana. Chile agradece la oportunidad de participar en este diálogo y valora la relevancia de discutir el uso de la inteligencia artificial para el reconocimiento facial en eventos masivos. Una tecnología que puede ofrecer soluciones efectivas en materia de seguridad, control de accesos y gestión de grandes concentraciones de personas, pero al mismo tiempo plantea desafíos en cuanto a la protección de derechos fundamentales, privacidad y prevención de discriminaciones. El reconocimiento facial basado en inteligencia artificial puede ser una herramienta clave para identificar amenazas en tiempo real, prevenir delitos y mejorar la logística de la gestión de eventos masivos. Sin embargo, su implementación debe ser cuidadosamente regulada para evitar vigilancias masivas injustificadas, sesgos en la identificación y afectaciones desproporcionadas a grupos vulnerables. Algunas consideraciones claves para la implementación responsable desde la perspectiva de Chile y que también fueron compartidas por los panelistas en sus ponencias. En el uso de esta tecnología en eventos masivos debe regirse por los siguientes principios. Primero, protección de datos personales y privacidad. Cualquier uso de reconocimiento facial debe garantizar el consentimiento informado, estableciendo mecanismos de transparencia y supervisión para evitar usos indebidos de la información biométrica, por ejemplo. 2. Prevención de sesgos y discriminación. Existen estudios que evidencian que los sistemas de reconocimiento facial pueden presentar mayores tasas de error en la identificación, por ejemplo, de mujeres, etnias y perfilamiento racial y otros grupos minoritarios. Por ello, es fundamental que las tecnologías implementadas sean auditadas regularmente para detectar y corregir posibles sesgos algorítmicos. 3. Proporcionalidad y uso legítimo. El reconocimiento facial debe aplicarse solo cuando sea estrictamente necesario y justificado, evitando su uso indiscriminado que pueda derivar a vulneraciones de derechos fundamentales. 4. Supervisión y rendición de cuentas. Es clave establecer mecanismos de auditoría y supervisión independientes para garantizar que el uso de esta tecnología respete los marcos normativos nacionales e internacionales de derechos humanos. Esto es un trabajo colectivo y de cooperación internacional. 5. Interoperabilidad y estándares internacionales, precisamente lo que tocaba en el punto anterior. Es fundamental alinear la regulación del uso del reconocimiento facial con instrumentos internacionales de gobernanza de la inteligencia artificial, incluyendo las recomendaciones de Naciones Unidas, la OCDE y UNESCO, que enfatizan la explicabilidad, equidad y transparencia en el desarrollo e implementación de estas tecnologías. ¿Qué avances concretos hemos dado a nivel nacional? Chile ha avanzado en la creación de un marco regulatorio que permita el desarrollo de la inteligencia artificial de manera ética y responsable. Actualmente nosotros estamos en primer trámite constitucional del proyecto de ley que regula los sistemas de inteligencia artificial, el cual establece principios fundamentales como la explicabilidad, la transparencia y la protección de datos personales, prohibiendo explícitamente el uso de sistemas de inteligencia artificial que generen discriminaciones arbitrarias o clasificaciones basadas en datos sensibles. Asimismo, la Política Nacional de Inteligencia Artificial promueve la implementación de estas tecnologías bajo un enfoque de derechos humanos, de equidad de género y prevención de sesgos, garantizando que sus beneficios sean accesibles para toda la sociedad. En cuanto al rol que nosotros creemos la OEA puede cumplir en materia de cooperación regional, sin duda representa un espacio clave para compartir buenas prácticas y fortalecer la cooperación regional en el uso responsable de la inteligencia artificial, tanto para reconocimiento facial como otras implementaciones, relevando nuestra base común como estados democráticos en la discusión internacional. Estamos convencidos que de nuestro trabajo conjunto podemos avanzar en la creación de estándares compartidos que permitan aprovechar los beneficios de esta tecnología, minimizando sus riesgos y asegurando que su aplicación respete los derechos fundamentales de nuestros ciudadanos. Para finalizar, señora Presidenta, Chile reitera su compromiso con la innovación responsable y la protección de los derechos humanos y está dispuesto a contribuir con su experiencia en el desarrollo de marcos normativos que garanticen su uso seguro y equitativo de la inteligencia artificial en la región, los cuales en específico compartiremos en el siguiente segmento de esta sesión. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chile. The delegation of Guatemala is recognized.
Muchas gracias, señora Presidenta. Reconocemos el acompañamiento de nuestro secretario de Seguridad Multidimensional, Iván Márquez, así como el acompañamiento de nuestra secretaria ejecutiva del SICTE, Alison Treppel. Un saludo también a todos los colegas que nos acompañan el día de hoy. Guatemala agradece la convocatoria a esta sesión especial sobre el uso de la inteligencia artificial para el reconocimiento facial en eventos multitudinarios. Hemos recibido con beneplácito cada una de las exposiciones sobre esta temática el día de hoy. Agradecemos a cada uno de los exponentes por sus valiosos aportes. Como todos sabemos, la seguridad es una tarea que incrementa su complejidad en un mundo con riesgos en constante evolución, convirtiéndose en un tema de alta prioridad para todos, y esto toma una mayor prevención ante un gran evento público masivo o que atraiga la atención internacional. Es por ello que este espacio nos permite profundizar sobre las ventajas y desafíos que puedan resultar de utilizar la inteligencia artificial en factores de seguridad en eventos multitudinarios, como lo es la aplicación del reconocimiento facial. Estimada Presidenta, como lo conversamos en la pasada sesión de discusiones globales acerca de la aplicación del derecho internacional en el ciberespacio, incluyendo los posibles impactos del uso de la inteligencia artificial, consideramos importante que la implementación de cualquier herramienta basada en la inteligencia artificial debe de cumplir con las normas jurídicas necesarias para desarrollar su uso responsable. Tomando en cuenta el vacío legal existente en la regulación del ciberespacio y las tecnologías basadas en inteligencia artificial, Guatemala considera fundamental establecer parámetros claros sobre el diseño, la fabricación, la programación, el despliegue y uso de sistemas autónomos, a fin de poder asignar responsabilidades tanto a los desarrolladores como a los operadores de estas tecnologías, lo que facilitaría la rendición de cuentas en caso de violaciones al derecho internacional. Asimismo, ante los retos actuales y futuros, mi país subraya la necesidad urgente de que el marco jurídico internacional evolucione para adaptarse a las rápidas transformaciones tecnológicas. Guatemala aboga por un enfoque colaborativo que se basa en el respeto de los derechos humanos y promueva la paz y la estabilidad. Este enfoque debe también permitir el desarrollo de la inteligencia artificial con fines pacíficos y para el beneficio colectivo, como lo podrá hacer el reconocimiento facial por la inteligencia artificial en eventos masivos. Estimada Presidenta, si bien la organización genera estos espacios valiosos para abordar esta temática, también debemos de abordar la transformación digital desde una perspectiva de crecimiento y desarrollo sostenible de los Estados miembros. La región debe aprovechar los beneficios de la revolución de la inteligencia artificial de manera inclusiva, ética, responsable y sostenible, para fomentar la construcción de un ecosistema de apoyo centrado en la inversión en infraestructura digital, la educación y mejora de las habilidades de la fuerza laboral, así como las instituciones efectivas que permitan, regulen y construyan sistemas de inteligencia artificial éticos e inclusivos en un marco jurídico efectivo. Para maximizar las ventajas de la inteligencia artificial para todos, debemos desarrollar una infraestructura pública digital robusta. Esto significa garantizar un acceso generalizado a Internet y servicios digitales confiables. Al igual que las carreteras y las redes eléctricas, la infraestructura pública digital es un elemento básico necesario para impulsar la transformación digital en la región. Nuevamente, agradecemos la convocatoria de esta reunión y escucharemos atentos a este intercambio de conocimientos y buenas prácticas de los países en la región sobre esta materia. Muchas gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you very much, Guatemala. The delegation of Brazil has the floor.
Obrigado, senhora presidenta. Saúdo todos os demais membros da mesa e agradeço aos apresentadores por suas brilhantes exposições. O Brasil reconhece o potencial da inteligência artificial, especialmente a tecnologia de reconhecimento facial, como uma ferramenta poderosa para promover a segurança pública, sobretudo em eventos com grandes multidões. Em um país de dimensões continentais, com celebrações culturais como o Carnaval e eventos esportivos de grande porte, essa tecnologia tem sido explorada para prevenir incidentes e proteger a população. Nosso governo vê na inovação um caminho para enfrentar os desafios complexos de segurança em contextos dinâmicos, mas também está atento às implicações éticas e jurídicas que seu uso acarreta. Um exemplo concreto de aplicação bem-sucedida é o programa da Polícia Rodoviária Federal, que utiliza a inteligência artificial para o reconhecimento de placas de veículos. Implantado em rodovias federais por todo o país, esse sistema identifica em tempo real veículos roubados ou irregulares, contribuindo para a redução da criminalidade e o fortalecimento da segurança viária. Desde 2023, mais de 7 mil veículos foram recuperados graças a essa tecnologia, o que evidencia seu impacto positivo na eficiência das operações policiais. Além disso, o governo federal brasileiro tem priorizado o uso de câmeras corporais pelas forças policiais como parte de uma estratégia nacional para reduzir a violência policial e aumentar a transparência. Em 2024, o Ministério da Justiça e Segurança Pública lançou um programa que oferece fundos federais aos governos estaduais para financiar a aquisição e implementação dessas câmeras com um investimento inicial de R$ 105 milhões ao longo de 30 meses. A estimativa é de que pelo menos 50% das polícias militares brasileiras possam, até 2027, contar com esse tipo de equipamento. Entretanto, como ressaltado nas apresentações dos especialistas e reiterado por vários dos colegas, o uso dessas tecnologias enfrenta barreiras éticas e legais significativas. A privacidade é uma questão central. A coleta de dados biométricos em larga escala, muitas vezes sem consentimento explícito, geram desafios éticos e jurídicos de grande monta. Esses desafios foram reconhecidos em reiteradas decisões dos tribunais brasileiros, que indicaram, por exemplo, dificuldades com a autorização do uso indiscriminado desse tipo de tecnologia em transportes públicos. Essas decisões da justiça brasileira refletem os desafios adicionais da tecnologia, como os vieses algorítmicos, que podem reforçar estereótipos e discriminar grupos historicamente marginalizados. No Brasil, há relatos de que o reconhecimento facial impacta desproporcionalmente populações negras e periféricas, o que contribui para perpetuar desigualdades. Diante disso, o Brasil defende o uso de inteligência artificial na segurança pública de modo embasado e calcado em evidências científicas, bem como de marcos regulatórios robustos alinhados à Lei Geral de Proteção de Dados do Brasil e aos princípios democráticos. Nesse sentido, incentivamos essa Comissão de Segurança Hemisférica a que debata o tema com base e informações providas por amplos setores da sociedade civil e da academia. A iniciativa de ter esse debate hoje muito contribui nesse sentido. Estaremos atentos para que novas iniciativas sejam aqui amplamente debatidas entre os Estados-membros. Muito obrigado, senhora presidenta.
Thank you, Brazil. I offer the floor to Colombia.
Gracias, señora Presidente. Mi delegación valora positivamente la inclusión de este importante tema en la agenda de esta comisión y agradece las ilustrativas presentaciones de los panelistas. Al respecto, Colombia considera que es clave reconocer cómo la evolución de las tecnologías digitales ha dado lugar a un aumento y una diversificación de las formas de delitos facilitados por y basados en la tecnología. Al mismo tiempo, coincidimos y resaltamos que las tecnologías digitales también brindan nuevas oportunidades para reforzar la labor en materia de aplicación de la ley y fortalecer las estrategias generales de prevención del delito. Nos encontramos en un momento crucial en el que la era digital toma un nuevo rumbo, que se caracteriza por la posibilidad de complementar el pensamiento y la acción humana con el potencial de la inteligencia artificial, lo que constituye una oportunidad para mejorar la justicia, la convivencia y la lucha contra el delito. Así, reconocemos también que existen múltiples oportunidades para aprovechar las tecnologías emergentes en el sistema de justicia penal de manera legal, ética y coherente para promover la equidad en el acceso a la justicia. En esta labor consideramos que la sociedad civil y las alianzas público-privadas desempeñan un papel fundamental. No obstante, debemos reconocer que la implementación de estas tecnologías trae consigo riesgos. El uso indebido de la inteligencia artificial y otras tecnologías digitales puede vulnerar los derechos fundamentales como la privacidad o la igualdad ante la ley. Por ello, es esencial adoptar un enfoque cuidadoso y responsable en su implementación. Colombia considera que la recomendación sobre la ética de la inteligencia artificial de la UNESCO establece un marco sólido para evitar que los sistemas de inteligencia artificial reproduzcan o amplifiquen sesgos discriminatorios, proponiendo principios como la inclusión, la diversidad, la transparencia y la rendición de cuentas. Así, nos sumamos a esta recomendación que subraya la necesidad de diseñar sistemas de inteligencia artificial que sean inclusivos y diversos, teniendo en cuenta la variedad de características y contextos culturales como el género, la raza, la religión, la discapacidad y otras formas de diversidad. Esto implica que los desarrolladores de inteligencia artificial deben ser conscientes de las diferencias sociales y culturales y evitar enfoques homogéneos. Para mi país es fundamental implementar la recomendación de la UNESCO en relación con la prevención de la discriminación algorítmica, así como los sistemas de inteligencia artificial deben ser diseñados y entrenados con datos diversos y representativos. Finalmente, Colombia apoya la importancia de la evaluación continua de los sistemas de inteligencia artificial en términos de su impacto social, ético y de derechos humanos. Esto implica que estas tecnologías deben ser sometidas a auditorías periódicas para detectar sesgos y corregirlos de manera proactiva. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Colombia. There being no further requests for the floor, the committee thanks our distinguished guests once again for sharing their experience, knowledge, and time with us today. And the committee takes note of the interventions made by delegations. I want to apologize. I'm going to have to depart to attend to another commitment on behalf of my country, but I am leaving you in the very capable hands of Second Vice Chair Pamela Polanco of the Dominican Republic. And she will take it from agenda item number 4. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everyone.
Bueno, muy buenas tardes. Seguimos con la siguiente sección que se centrará en el desarrollo de normas para el despliegue de la inteligencia artificial en el reconocimiento facial, garantizando que las consideraciones de seguridad se equilibren con la privacidad, la transparencia y la responsabilidad. Primero recibiremos una presentación sobre las normas básicas fundamentales para el uso de la inteligencia artificial en el reconocimiento facial, centrada en las consideraciones de seguridad. Inmediatamente después mantendremos un diálogo entre las delegaciones. Para la presentación, me gustaría ofrecer la palabra al doctor Giacomo Persi Paoli, jefe del Programa de Seguridad de Tecnología del Instituto de Naciones Unidas de Investigación sobre el Desarme. Doctor Paoli, tiene la palabra.
Thank you, Chair. I hope you can hear me well, loud and clear. It is truly a pleasure for me to have the opportunity to brief you today on this very interesting topic. I'm Giacomo Persipaoli. I'm the head of the Security and Technology Program at the United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research. And I found, when I received the invitation to participate in this event, I found it particularly interesting because while much of our work at UNIDIR focuses on the kind of the hard part of security, looking at the use of these technologies, artificial intelligence, autonomous systems, more in the context of defense and military operations, as we are been engaging more closely with different regions of the world to discuss what does the responsible development and adoption and deployment of artificial intelligence look like. We discovered that, in fact, the line that separates concepts from security, national security, public safety is very blurred and is very context and region dependent. There are regions, there are countries and regions in the world where military forces are predominantly used domestically, for example, in the context of combating organized crime or counterterrorism, etc. So I think it is important that we look at the application of AI in a context like facial recognition for mass events that is primarily a public safety context, but that can have and has very strong national security implications, particularly if we look more closely to use cases that pertain, for example, to counterterrorism. So it is really a pleasure, Excellencies and distinguished delegates, to have the opportunity to be with you today. I think it is fair to say, and we've heard and we've seen through all of the previous presentations about how the growing use of artificial intelligence in security applications raises fundamental questions about its effectiveness. It is, of course, effective, but also around accountability and human rights. AI-powered facial recognition has been already deployed with the aim of enhancing public safety, streamlining security operations, and identifying threats in real time, or at the very least, reduce to the minimum extent the lag time that goes between when a threat is potentially detected to the moment it is properly classified and identified. And when implemented responsibly, I think that AI has demonstrated tangible benefits. For example, at major events like sporting events or others, AI-enabled or driven systems have helped quickly identify persons of interest, reducing response times for security personnel. But in other cases, facial recognition has assisted, for example, in identifying or reuniting missing persons, including children with their families, and also in general, for a more kind of security perspective, it has significantly helped with crowd management. And we've seen just a very interesting presentation of Eagle AI just a few minutes ago about how really AI can help identify and predict patterns of behaviors within crowds that can lead to severe safety concerns, but also security concerns. Again, if we put all of these in the specific context of counterterrorism. However, alongside these advantages, there are, of course, concerns about accuracy, privacy, and proportionality that remain central. And addressing these concerns really requires a clear and principled approach. We already heard from my colleague at UNICRI this idea of having principle-based approach to the development and use of these technologies. So let's go through some of the key topics that were indicated as being relevant for this group, and let's try to understand what are some of the baseline requirements or some of the standards that one may consider. We will talk later about the role that some industry groups and industry standards are starting to play in this field, because while the policy debate might be proceeding at a certain speed, industry debate is proceeding in parallel, and in many circumstances, it has actually achieved quicker consensus on what are some baseline industry standards that could be considered. But let's start with accuracy and bias prevention. And we've heard this already, so none of this is going to be new to you, but AI systems are only as effective as the data that they're trained on and the data that they're fed once they're deployed. So bias in facial recognition system has been well documented, particularly in cases where data sets are not representative of diverse populations. And inaccurate or biased AI outputs really risk not only undermining operational effectiveness of the system itself, but also undermining public trust. And when this leads to wrongful identification, of course, it has significant safety, security, and human rights considerations. And by the way, this applies to both what we call false positives, so people being flagged that shouldn't be flagged, but also false negatives, by which persons of interest or specific individuals that were supposed to be flagged somehow went undetected. So a commitment to having diverse training data sets, as well as continuous auditing and independent testing, is really key to mitigate some of these risks. We've also heard already extensively about data protection and privacy. Now, facial recognition involves the collection and processing of biometric data, as we heard already, which is one of the most sensitive forms of personal information. Now, strong safeguards must be in place to prevent not only the misuse, but also unauthorized access to this data and of this data. Compliance with national and international privacy law, such as data minimization, retention limits, and strict access control, is really critical. Another important element to consider when thinking about standards or baseline requirements is really around transparency and accountability. And we've always or often heard the term black box being associated with artificial intelligence, in the sense that most operators and sometimes even engineers themselves and programmers don't necessarily fully understand the way in which an AI system processes a certain input to achieve a certain output. Now, when it comes to deployment of AI in security settings, and this includes facial recognition, I believe it would be important that our tolerance for not understanding is really reduced to the minimum. Establishing clear oversight mechanisms, again, through independent audits, as well as other types of both technical but also policy mechanisms that can be designed in order to mitigate the risks that emerge from a black box, is really important. This doesn't mean that all operators or all policymakers should suddenly become AI engineers. That's not going to happen, but that's not even the necessary or the whole purpose. However, ensuring that individuals understand the limitations of the technology that they're using, if they are operators, as well as they understand when and how their biometric data is used, is a fundamental component of trustworthy AI governance. Moving to the proportionality and necessity, I think this is really, these are very strong pillars of international law. We hear them often referred to in the processes that I follow more closely, that as it relates to international humanitarian law, of course, but more in general, I think that the general concepts behind these principles is very transferable also to public safety and other national security contexts. In particular, facial recognition here should be used only when necessary and proportionate to the security risks at hand. And this means evaluating whether alternatives, potentially less intrusive security measures, could achieve the same objective. So do we really need AI? When does AI really bring added value or advantage? And let's make sure that we limit the use of AI to those specific use cases, rather than having this powerful technology and then just trying to use this technology to replace other measures when potentially that's not necessarily supported by evidence. Now, deployments of this technology should be clearly justified, should be legally grounded, and also subject to regular review to assess their impact on human rights and civil liberties. This subject to regular review part, I think, is very important, because the technology is changing, as well as the data that the technology can use to train itself or to be trained on is also changing, etc. So while for other systems we have established a much more robust, tried and tested way to phase them out when they reach obsolescence or their natural end of operational utility, it is still not clear that for AI-enabled system we have really grasped what obsolescence management looks like and how to phase out these technologies, how to identify when a certain technology has reached a moment in the life cycle in which it needs to be phased out. Now, the last 2 points I want to make, I think, are really important. One is about the cybersecurity and system integrity. There is a lot of discussion that goes into AI safety, and that is for good reasons. And AI safety in general is that field that covers all of those risks that pertain to the technology itself and how it is developed and deployed. So things about explainability, things about predictability, trustworthiness. Those are all AI safety related issues. There isn't that much emphasis that is being put on AI security, which refers more to intentional adversarial action that is conducted in order to impact the effectiveness of an AI system. So you can have a perfectly safe, from a safety standpoint, AI system, but if it is not secured, it is then vulnerable to adversarial action. And this can pose significant risks. So given the sensitivity of biometric data that facial recognition systems collect and process, cybersecurity is a core requirement for any AI-driven facial recognition system. Strong encryption, secure storage, and protection against data breaches and misuse really should be incorporated from the outset to prevent exploitation by malicious actors. And this is particularly relevant as adversarial attacks against AI-enabled recognition systems could be used to significantly alter the performance and the reliability of the system itself. For example, by saturating it with false positives, or by, in a way, altering the weights, the different weights that the system uses to categorize the individuals it detects and processes to, in a way, bias the outcome. The last point here that I would like to cover is a way of, a preparation to, I believe, what the next speaker is going to be covering, which is more about the international cooperation element. And I want to reflect on the interoperability and security cooperation component here. Now, in an increasingly interconnected world, interoperability between AI systems used for public security and public safety is critical. Interoperability both within a national government where you may have different national agencies that are using different systems, as well as across borders. Security threats do not necessarily respect borders, and ensuring that facial recognition technologies can function seamlessly across jurisdictions while maintaining strong privacy and legal safeguards is really important. So if we consider, for example, the entire value chain that is involved in the delivery or in the use of AI systems, we can have companies that are offering AI solutions that might be based in another country than the government or the law enforcement agency that is utilizing these services. And the data may be flowing through third or fourth jurisdictions, because maybe data centers are located yet in another country. So clearly there is a jurisdictional component that needs to be taken into account, as well as kind of technical interoperability of the systems themselves. And of course, in this context, standardizing protocols for data sharing between trusted partners and enhancing cross-border law enforcement cooperation is really important, as well as establishing common security frameworks that can be used to counter transnational threats. Now, by aligning these technological capabilities and regulatory approaches, countries can really maximize the security benefits that AI brings, including through facial recognition systems, while safeguarding fundamental rights. And in conclusion, while AI-powered facial recognition is and can be a valuable tool for public security and safety, its deployment really should be responsible, transparent, and governed by clear ethical and legal standards. The challenge before us is not just how to deploy these technologies effectively, but how to do so in a manner that upholds fundamental rights and public trust. I mentioned that there are already industry standards that are being developed and used by the technology developers. And these standards cover both the facial recognition part of this discussion, as well as the AI part of this discussion. The question is, and this standardization body, whether it's the IEEE, whether it's the International Standardization Organization, or more national initiatives like the National Institute for Standards and Technology, NIST, there are many of these standards that have been put forward that address some of the challenges that I've mentioned, whether it's standards covering specifically data interchange formats for face image data to ensure consistency and interoperability, whether it is about the standards for the responsible and effective use of facial recognition technology, emphasizing ethical practices and transparency, or standards about biometrics or AI development and auditing. Those standards are there. The question is, how can governments take advantage and maximum advantage of the incredible work that some of this industry group have been doing to come up with these standards that remain voluntary measures. And one way in which governments could potentially take advantage of these standards that exist is by making them mandatory requirements when you go to the market and try to procure some of these advanced technologies and capabilities. Governments have a very strong influence, or can have a very strong influence on the market, simply by taking some of these standards that are born as voluntary measures and making them requirements to be able to qualify and access government procurement opportunities. And what I'm saying is nothing new. This has already been the case in other fields, particularly in relation to cybersecurity. That's already been done, and there is no reason why this could not be extended to cover also standardization efforts that have been promoted in the field of facial recognition and AI. And with that, I thank you very much for your attention.
interesante, donde nos presentó las normas, la estructura normativa y la conexión que hay entre los beneficios y los límites que debemos ponerle a la inteligencia artificial en todo lo que tiene que ver con el uso de la misma en el reconocimiento facial. Tras haber escuchado esta presentación, me gustaría ofrecer la palabra a las delegaciones que quisieran hacer comentarios sobre lo que acabamos de escuchar. Tiene la palabra la delegación de Perú.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta. Siendo la primera vez que participo, un saludo de la delegación de Perú. También reconocemos la presencia del secretario de Seguridad Multidimensional, Iván Márquez, y la señora secretaria ejecutiva de SICTE, el señor Alison Treppel. Deseamos primero agradecer la realización de esta sesión para reflexionar sobre el uso de la inteligencia artificial para el reconocimiento facial en eventos multitudinarios. Agradecemos igualmente la locución realizada por el secretario de Seguridad Multidimensional, así como las presentaciones realizadas por los distinguidos panelistas en esta sesión, las cuales hemos tomado debida nota. Señora Presidenta, el Perú está comprometido con la promoción de la paz, la seguridad y los derechos humanos en nuestra región. Consideramos que el impacto social de las nuevas tecnologías emergentes, como la inteligencia artificial, representan oportunidades y desafíos que deben abordarse de manera urgente y decidida. Es de interés nacional la promoción del talento digital en el aprovechamiento de las tecnologías emergentes y nuevas tecnologías en favor del bienestar social y económico, así como el fomento del desarrollo y uso de inteligencia artificial para mejora de los servicios públicos, de la educación, la salud, la justicia, la seguridad ciudadana, la seguridad digital, la economía, la inclusión, la seguridad y la defensa nacional, así como para otra actividad económica y social a nivel nacional. Desde la Secretaría de Gobierno y Transformación Digital, ente rector del Sistema Nacional de Transformación Digital, se encuentra realizando grandes esfuerzos para este objetivo. Al respecto, se han adoptado medidas legislativas como el Decreto Legislativo 1412, Ley de Gobierno Digital, con el objeto de establecer el marco de gobernanza del gobierno digital en el Estado y el régimen jurídico para el uso de tecnologías digitales en la administración pública y otras actividades. Asimismo, el Perú ha promulgado el 2023 la Ley 31814, que promueve el uso de la inteligencia artificial en favor del desarrollo económico y social del país, y esta norma tiene por objetivo promover el uso de la inteligencia artificial en el marco del Proceso Nacional de Transformación Digital, privilegiando a la persona y el respeto a los derechos humanos con el fin de fomentar el desarrollo económico y social del país en un entorno seguro que garantice su uso ético, sostenible, transparente y responsable. Por otro lado, es importante encontrar un equilibrio entre el uso de la inteligencia artificial para la seguridad y la protección de los derechos fundamentales como la privacidad y la no discriminación. Por ello, la importancia de contar con un marco legal y regulatorio sólido que establezca lineamientos éticos para el uso sostenible, transparente y replicable de la inteligencia artificial. Esto coincide, como bien indicaron en esta sesión, que una regulación clara, la supervisión humana y la cooperación internacional son esenciales para un uso responsable de estas tecnologías. Coincidimos también en que la formación en inteligencia artificial para el personal de seguridad y la transparencia en las políticas pueden generar confianza pública y así maximizar sus beneficios. Señora Presidenta, el Perú reafirma su compromiso con el desarrollo de tecnologías que fortalezcan la seguridad ciudadana sin comprometer los derechos y libertades fundamentales. Consideramos que esta sesión es una oportunidad valiosa para avanzar en los debates sobre el uso responsable de la inteligencia artificial. Asimismo, reiteramos nuestra disposición a contribuir más con un diálogo regional que garantice que la innovación tecnológica privilegie a la persona y el respeto a los derechos humanos. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias a la delegación de Perú. Le damos la palabra a la distinguida embajadora de Panamá.
Señora Presidenta, muchísimas gracias. La inteligencia artificial representa una oportunidad sin precedentes para el desarrollo y la competitividad de nuestras naciones. Sin embargo, su adopción plantea desafíos que requieren la formulación de políticas públicas sólidas y una cooperación internacional efectiva. Panamá ha dado pasos significativos en esta dirección. La Secretaría Nacional de Ciencia, Tecnología e Innovación, SENACIT, está impulsando la creación de una Estrategia Nacional de Inteligencia Artificial en colaboración con el gobierno, sectores productivos, la academia y la sociedad civil. Esta iniciativa busca posicionar al país como líder en la aplicación segura, confiable y ética de la inteligencia artificial, promoviendo su uso en sectores claves como la educación, la salud, la agricultura y la seguridad. Además, Panamá ha suscrito recientemente en Seúl la Declaración Política sobre el uso responsable de inteligencia artificial y autonomía en el ámbito militar, reafirmando nuestro compromiso con una utilización ética y conforme al derecho internacional. Aunque nuestro país carece de fuerzas armadas, consideramos esencial participar en estos acuerdos para promover la seguridad internacional y el respeto a la dignidad humana. En el ámbito regional, Panamá ha sido un actor activo en foros internacionales que abogan por una inteligencia artificial ética y sostenible. Recientemente, en la reunión de ministros y altas autoridades de ciencia y tecnología, destacamos la importancia de que estas tecnologías estén al servicio de nuestras sociedades, contribuyendo a cerrar brechas sociales y promoviendo el bienestar colectivo. Por ello, nuestro país respalda todos los esfuerzos para promover una inteligencia artificial segura, confiable y ética en las Américas, garantizando que ésta fortalezca, en lugar de vulnerar los principios democráticos, los derechos humanos y las libertades individuales. Muchas gracias, Presidenta.
Muchas gracias, embajadora de Panamá. Le pasamos la palabra a la delegación de Chile.
Muchas gracias, señora Presidenta. Quisiéramos partir nuestra intervención agradeciendo al doctor Giacomo Persi por su excelente presentación, como también aprovechar la oportunidad para reconocer el fundamental rol que tiene y juega UNIDIR en el acompañamiento a los estados en la creación de capacidades por medio de sus documentos y estudios especializados, como también de programas, que también sin duda colaboran con nuestra organización de forma fundamental. Chile valora profundamente la oportunidad de compartir su experiencia en el desarrollo de un marco normativo y estratégico para la inteligencia artificial, destacando avances clave en protección de datos, regulación de inteligencia artificial y aplicaciones concretas en identificación digital y servicios públicos, por ejemplo. En primer lugar, la Ley de Protección de Datos Personales de Chile, cuya reforma tomó 7 años de tramitación precisamente en atención de las emergentes tecnologías y avances, ha sido fundamental para garantizar el derecho a la privacidad y la protección de datos en el entorno digital. Inspirada en estándares internacionales como el Reglamento General de Protección de Datos de la Unión Europea, esta legislación establece principios como transparencia, consentimiento informado y seguridad de la información. Además, crea la Agencia de Protección de Datos Personales, encargada de supervisar y fiscalizar el cumplimiento de estas normativas, asegurando que las tecnologías emergentes como la inteligencia artificial y el reconocimiento facial se implementen con respeto a los derechos fundamentales. En cuanto al desarrollo estratégico de inteligencia artificial, Chile ha impulsado la Política Nacional de Inteligencia Artificial, que establece una hoja de ruta centrada en 3 pilares fundamentales: factores habilitantes, como por ejemplo infraestructuras, desarrollo y adopción de la inteligencia artificial, y gobernanza y regulación. Este enfoque busca equilibrar innovación y competitividad con el resguardo de ética, equidad y prevención de sesgos. Se promueve la capacitación de talento humano, la cooperación público-privada y el refuerzo de la ciberseguridad, garantizando que el uso de la inteligencia artificial está alineado con valores democráticos y derechos fundamentales. Una de las aplicaciones concretas de inteligencia artificial en Chile ha sido su incorporación, por ejemplo, en la emisión de nuevas cédulas de identidad y pasaportes, fortaleciendo la seguridad y autentificación biométrica en los procesos de identificación. La tecnología de inteligencia artificial permite una verificación facial precisa y reducción del fraude, integrando salvaguardas como auditorías periódicas, supervisión humana y protección de datos personales. Además, este sistema ha sido desarrollado en cooperación con organismos internacionales, asegurando su interoperabilidad con estándares globales de seguridad y control migratorio, por ejemplo. Esto también obedece, por ejemplo, a desafíos como las identidades digitales que todos nuestros estados estamos actualmente desarrollando y evaluando. En términos normativos, Chile ha avanzado en el proyecto de ley que regula los sistemas de inteligencia artificial. Este proyecto regula la transparencia, y explicabilidad y equidad de los sistemas de inteligencia artificial, prohibiendo usos de riesgo inaceptables, como la identificación biométrica en tiempo real sin supervisión y la extracción masiva de imágenes faciales sin consentimiento. Asimismo, promueve mecanismos de auditoría y supervisión humana para evitar discriminaciones o sesgos algorítmicos. Muchos de los elementos que aquí nosotros hemos rescatado en nuestro proyecto de ley fueron abordados en la ponencia del Dr. Percy. A nivel internacional, Chile ha participado activamente, como por ejemplo en el reciente AI Safety Summit desarrollado en Francia, reafirmando su compromiso con la gobernanza responsable de la inteligencia artificial y destacando la importancia de establecer cooperación global en la seguridad de modelos avanzados de inteligencia artificial. En este espacio, Chile ha enfatizado la necesidad de fortalecer marcos regulatorios compartidos, fomentar la transparencia y garantizar el desarrollo inclusivo de la inteligencia artificial, evitando impactos negativos en sectores vulnerables y poblaciones vulnerables. Finalmente, Chile, junto al respaldo de expertos, organizaciones y centros de investigación de México, Argentina, Colombia, Ecuador, Estados Unidos, España, Perú y Uruguay, a través de su Centro Nacional de Inteligencia Artificial, CENIA, centro que también ha sido certificado como Centro de Excelencia OEA, anunció su lanzamiento del Chat GPT LATAM para junio de este año. Una versión optimizada de esta tecnología equivalente a las capacidades 3.5 de ChatGPT de OpenAI para la región, lo que representa una oportunidad para fortalecer el acceso a herramientas de inteligencia artificial adaptadas a los contextos culturales y lingüísticos de América Latina. Este avance permite impulsar la transformación digital en áreas como educación, servicios ciudadanos e innovación tecnológica, promoviendo el uso responsable de la inteligencia artificial con un enfoque centrado en ética, equidad y derechos humanos, como también representar a nuestra región en las actuales innovaciones globales. Señora Presidenta, Chile continuará trabajando para consolidar un ecosistema de inteligencia artificial seguro, transparente e inclusivo, donde la tecnología impulse el desarrollo sin comprometer los derechos fundamentales. Reiteramos nuestro compromiso con la cooperación regional e internacional para avanzar en una inteligencia artificial que sirva a la humanidad y respete la dignidad de todas las personas. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias a la delegación de Chile. Tiene la palabra la delegación de México.
Muchas gracias, Presidenta. Es un gusto verla presidir. Quiero también agradecer la presentación del representante de UNIDIR, además del acompañamiento que esta agencia da a los programas que emprendemos en la organización. Señora Presidenta, México reconoce la creciente relevancia de la inteligencia artificial en múltiples ámbitos, incluido su uso en la seguridad pública. La aplicación de tecnologías como el reconocimiento facial en eventos multitudinarios presenta oportunidades significativas para fortalecer la seguridad, pero también presenta desafíos en términos de privacidad, derechos humanos y gobernanza. Permítame un momento, Presidenta, por favor. Listo. Derivado del reciente cambio de administración en México, se han impulsado diversas reformas encaminadas a fortalecer el marco jurídico e institucional mexicano. Una vez que estas modificaciones se consoliden, será posible evaluar la viabilidad de impulsar la vinculación de México a 2 tratados clave adoptados en el marco del Consejo de Europa, organismo en el cual México participa en calidad de observador. Nos referimos al protocolo de enmienda al Convenio para la Protección de las Personas con respecto al tratamiento automatizado de datos de carácter personal, así como al Convenio Marco sobre Inteligencia Artificial, Derechos Humanos, Democracia y Estado de Derecho, aprobado en 2024. Estos instrumentos ofrecen directrices fundamentales para garantizar un desarrollo y uso de la inteligencia artificial alineados con principios de transparencia, equidad y respeto a los derechos humanos, elementos que consideramos esenciales para el uso de tecnologías avanzadas en la seguridad pública. Aunado a ello, México reconoce la trascendencia histórica de la Resolución 78-265, adoptada por consenso en la Asamblea General de la ONU el 21 de marzo de 2024, que alienta a promover sistemas de inteligencia artificial seguros y fiables de manera inclusiva y equitativa para el beneficio de todos, así como la recomendación sobre la ética de la inteligencia artificial de la UNESCO de 2021. Este marco internacional refuerza la necesidad de desarrollar capacidades nacionales robustas y políticas de gobernanza que fomenten el uso responsable de la inteligencia artificial en todos los sectores. México valora la oportunidad de participar en este espacio que constituye un foro clave para el intercambio de experiencias y mejores prácticas en el uso de la inteligencia artificial para la seguridad pública. La cooperación regional e internacional es esencial para abordar los desafíos que plantea la implementación de estas tecnologías y así maximizar sus beneficios en beneficio de todas nuestras sociedades. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias a la Delegación de México. No habiendo más pedidos de palabra, queremos agradecer a nuestro distinguido invitado por su presentación y tomamos nota de las intervenciones que han hecho las delegaciones. Distinguidos representantes, expertos y participantes, los debates de hoy han puesto de relieve tanto los beneficios potenciales como los retos críticos asociados al despliegue del reconocimiento facial basado en inteligencia artificial en la seguridad pública. Hemos visto cómo estas tecnologías, cuando se aplican correctamente, pueden mejorar los esfuerzos de seguridad, ayudar a las fuerzas del orden y contribuir a la seguridad pública en eventos de gran escala. Sin embargo, también se ha destacado que la transparencia, la rendición de cuentas y el respeto de los derechos fundamentales deben seguir siendo el centro de cualquier aplicación que le demos a la inteligencia artificial. Una de las principales conclusiones de esta reunión es la importancia de seguir avanzando en la cooperación regional y el intercambio de experiencias sobre las aplicaciones de inteligencia artificial en la seguridad. Muchos de nuestros Estados miembros han expresado un gran interés en seguir desarrollando soluciones de seguridad basadas en inteligencia artificial, al tiempo de que han destacado la necesidad de compartir información sobre mejoras prácticas, normas técnicas y marcos normativos. La OEA, a través de esta comisión, está bien posicionada para apoyar estos esfuerzos, fomentando la colaboración y facilitando los intercambios entre países, expertos y organizaciones internacionales. De cara al futuro, debemos trabajar juntos para compartir información, reforzar los mecanismos nacionales de gobernanza de inteligencia artificial y avanzar en el desarrollo de directrices para el despliegue responsable de las mismas. Esto incluye explorar oportunidades de formación, iniciativas de capacitación y recomendaciones políticas que se ajusten a las normas internacionales. De este modo, no solo maximizaremos los beneficios de la inteligencia artificial, sino que también garantizaremos que su aplicación refleje los valores de la democracia, los derechos humanos y el Estado de Derecho. Expreso mi sincero agradecimiento a todos nuestros distinguidos oradores, panelistas y Estados miembros por su participación y sus valiosas contribuciones. Continuemos este diálogo, construyamos sobre las discusiones de hoy y trabajemos colectivamente hacia una adopción responsable, efectiva y ética de la inteligencia artificial en las Américas. Gracias por la participación y no habiendo más puntos que considerar en la agenda de hoy, se levanta la sesión.
Okay.